We have Resident Evil Requiem. Hoo-wee, let me tell you. All right, so brief history of my Resident Evil experience. I mean, I've played pretty much every game in the series, minus some of the rail shooter type games and like the handheld games and stuff. But essentially, actually, the only ones I haven't really played from the main series are like the original Resident Evil, the original Resident Evil 2, the original Resident Evil 3. I played the remakes. I played the GameCube remake of the first one, and I played the modern remakes of 2 and 3. And generally, like, my experience with Resident Evil is always an enjoyable one. It's not often I play one that I don't like. Obviously, like, there's things that could be done better. Like, I understand people weren't happy with the Resident Evil 3 remake because they cut a lot of content. It was a really short game. That said, I just replayed it recently in like a couple hours. I, just kind of ran through it, and it's a lot of fun if you think of it as like an arcadey type shooter. But I understand like there's not as much depth to it as other games. But I really liked Biohazard, Resident Evil 7, and then Village was another one I really liked. I thought that was a fun game. But this felt like the first like real sequel to the series since like Resident Evil 6, other than Chris Redfield showing up in the last two games, like this felt like, all right, we're finally kind of seeing where things are going. And yeah, I played it. I was really excited for this. I stayed up. Well, I slept. I came home from work one day, slept till like 1 or 2 in the morning, got up, made some food, went downstairs, fired up the game, played it for 14 hours straight, beat the whole game. Yeah, of course, can't breathe now. And yeah, I've got opinions, I've got feelings about it. You know, it's a lot of fun. It's a great game. Like, I can't deny that. Like, despite any gripes I may feel, any disappointment I may have, any frustrations, it's still a great game. I feel like my issues with this one were just kind of like story choices. But I'll kind of run through the game real quick and give you like a brief rundown. So, most of the game you're playing is the girl, Grace, or most of the first half of the game you're playing is Grace. And you're in like this, this like medical hospital where naturally they're experimenting on people, turning them into zombies. And that first half of the game was really tense. Like, there's a lot of great sequences of tension and horror, on the edge of your seat, running for your life. A lot of trial and error, dying type stuff. And yeah, it's just a really fun, like, Resident Evil experience. And you kind of switch back and forth between Grace and Leon throughout the game. And when you go to Leon, he's full on John Wick, cutting up zombies, shooting them, blowing their heads off, kicking them around. And it's awesome stuff. And then, the later half of the game, it kind of switches back. It kind of goes more to like the Leon full action game thing. And I think like some of the things that the game was missing was like one of the big things, you go back to Raccoon City, which is like a big thing from the earlier part of the series. And there's a little bit of like new areas you're exploring. There's a little bit of like, hey, you're exploring areas from the earlier games that are in ruins, and all that's great. It does feel a little bit lengthy at times, where you're just kind of going through these areas, fighting all these enemies, and it feels a little Resident Evil 6y to me, where it's just like full on action for a long time without anything really like tense like happening. And then it kind of divulges into like a boss rush mode where you're just kind of fighting like one boss after another, which is fun, but there's also like a certain element of the story that I felt like was lacking, which I'll get into in a little bit. But generally, the gameplay is awesome. The controls are awesome. It makes me really want like a mercenaries mode, because that's like a thing that it would be great for. And then, the ending is pretty well done. They have a pretty good like good ending, bad ending type thing where they kind of. I felt like I was paying attention to the game and I picked the right ending because of that. But they kind of like trick you because Leon tells you to do one thing and you gotta choose to do the other thing. But overall, like the way it wraps up, kind of felt like, all right, just another it felt like another Monster of the Week type adventure for the game. Like, say what you want about Resident Evil 6, but it felt like there was a lot of big things happening in that game that affected the overall world, and that was really interesting. And they never really kind of dove into that again. But this game, felt pretty contained. Obviously there's always somebody that's trying to get the next thing that's going to destroy the world, and it was funny that there was like a bit of a plot twist regarding that. But to me, so the main things that I didn't like about the game were, one of the things that I've always thought was fun about the Resident Evil games is kind of starting off with next to nothing and then like building up throughout the game until you're like this powerhouse of a character. Now, I can understand why they didn't go that route with Grace. Like, I felt like sometimes they do that with characters and you're like, this person would never do that, So I feel like I understand why they didn't do that with Grace. But, like Ethan Winters was a character that was kind of like that. He started off with nothing, and then he ends up with a pistol, and then next thing he's got a shotgun. You just kind of like go through the game as you're dealing with more and more threats. You get better and better weapons. You have more of a way to fight back. And this game kind of lacked that a little bit. Like, it was kind of like when you're playing as Grace, you were always under-equipped. You were always like not really able to defend yourself. You were kind of relying on stealth and like using the game's mechanics to kind of survive. And then like when you were Leon, you were just mowing down enemies and nothing could really stop you if you knew how to play the game properly. My favorite thing in these games is, especially these last couple games with Leon, because in Resident Evil 4 Remake, he had the knife, and then this one he has like the hatchet, but it's like, you've literally got this like 50-foot tall monster like slamming its tentacle down on you, and he can just like parry it with the axe, just like pling, like that giant tentacle didn't smash me. So it's like a little bit funny like that. I much preferred Resident Evil 3's like dodging system, like at least, because that's like something that you could do in Resident Evil 4 is dodge, but it was like a quick time event as opposed to like a skill related thing where it's like, all right, like if you can just learn the attacks and time your dodge as well, then you could get really good at the game like that. But the parry thing, I guess, is like an equivalent type thing, but there's just time where it's like, giant like 50-pound trolls like about to punch you, and you're just like pling and like block with your knife. It's hilarious. But yeah. So the overall progression of the combat in the game kind of felt it didn't feel like there was a combat progression. And my favorite thing too is like Leon basically, when it gets to like his main portion of the game, he just gets like a point system. It's like, all right, well, you kill enemies and you get points, and you can use those points to buy more weapons. It's like, okay, there's not even a merchant. Like, you're just it just kind of lost a lot of that steam there. But so there's that, and then The other main thing that bugged me is that there's like two characters that show up, and they're obviously implying that they're certain characters, but they never really like confirm or deny it. And like the implications of including those characters is like so huge that it's like, all right, well, it kind of feels weird that you didn't address it. Like, you got one character that shows up that's basically like, you think it's a revived version of a dead character, and you're like, okay. Then they call him a different name, even though he looks like the guy, sounds like the guy, literally has the same voice actor as the guy, has all the same moves as the guy. They just call him something different, and you're just supposed to be like, okay. Other than like some minor, like, it's not even confirmation. They're just hints. I know a lot of people point out, oh, well, they talk about transferring memories and stuff. And it's like, yeah, I get that. I get that cloning isn't necessarily something that's new to this series. But, like, if you're not going to actually, like, address it, like, why didn't you just make it another villain? Like, it could have been just anybody, really. So they do that. And then there's another character that shows up as, like, a boss fight. And they, again, looks like the guy, acts like the guy, fights like the guy, has the same voice actor as the guy, but then they call him something different, and then they act like, oh, was it that guy? Like, you could have just, why didn't you just address it? Like, you could have just said, hey, that's the guy, or you could have just had a different guy, and we would have been fine. So, and that's about it. Like, overall, it's fun. I just think that usually Resident Evil is a lot tighter with its storytelling. Usually, like, the characters in the story are, like, fleshed out. And, you learn enough about them throughout the game. And then when you actually have a showdown with them, you're like, all right, here we go. Here's the big showdown. Not just, like, people showing up and you're like, all right, I'm fighting this guy now. Then you take them out. And then you get to the next guy. All right, now I'm fighting this guy now. Okay. There was, like, less of that in this game. There's really only, like, one guy that's there throughout the game, and he's an interesting enough villain. Like, he's definitely got personality, but he just never really he didn't really like have a lot of moments to shine. Like, he just kind of shows up, has a good scene, and then disappears. Like, you never really get to see much of him. But overall, I think it's a great game. It's definitely like for your money's worth. It's got a good solid runtime. It's got some good sequences. It's got a lot of good action in it. Yeah, the one girl that, like, I mean, they call her a girl, but she's like a big, like, 12-foot tall monster that chases you through a bunch of the game. Like, that was definitely one of the freakiest parts of the game, and there's a couple times that get you pretty good with it. You think you're gonna, like, get somewhere, and then you mess up and you get trapped. There's a couple times I thought I was being clever, and then I try to do something, and the next thing you know, I'm luring a bunch of zombies down a hallway and trapping myself. Like, it's it's got some really fun moments, and if you're a fan of the Resident Evil games, I can't recommend it enough. And here's hoping to more games soon. I know there's a lot of rumors about remakes. Obviously, I'm all about it. I like the idea of a good classic game being remade. Obviously, right now, I'm really excited if they do Code Veronica X, just because I want to see them do something really cool with the Nosferatu, like, monster. I want to see them do something really cool with that. That Antarctica setting, I think that's what it is. It's like a snow-based setting, but it'd be cool if they did some really cool, creepy stuff with that. And then, there's talk of the original Resident Evil getting made. I'm excited about that. I know a lot of people think that that's not something that needs to happen, but I think it would be really cool. I think that it's been long enough. I think it would be a good game to see get remade. And then, I know there's a lot of other ones that are being rumored, but those are the two that I would be most excited for. So there you have it. Resident Evil, my whole Resident Evil in a nutshell thing. So